The clippers buzzed like a swarm of angry bees. And in that sound, my world shattered. Ethan, my boy, my heart, sat frozen in the community center's bathroom, his eyes wide with shock as his blonde curls fell to the floor. Karen, that venomous woman, stood over him, her face twisted with righteous fury, spitting words that cut deeper than any blade. This is what happens when you flaunt that lifestyle. I wasn't there when it happened. If I had been, I'd have torn those clippers from her hands and made her choke on her own cruelty. But I was across town, working my second shift at the diner, scraping together every cent to keep Ethan in art supplies and dreams of college. When he called me, his voice trembling, barely a whisper, I dropped everything, plates crashing, customers staring, and ran to him. The town of Willow Creek, Ohio, was small, the kind of place where everyone knew your business before you did. It was a patchwork of old brick buildings, cornfields stretching to the horizon, and a community center that doubled as the heart of our little world. Ethan, 17, had always been different, bright, sensitive, with a laugh that could light up the gloomiest day. He'd come out as gay last summer, and I'd held him close, promising nothing would change how I loved him. But Willow Creek wasn't ready for my son's truth. Karen Mitchell, 38, was the self-appointed guardian of traditional values in our town. She ran the community center's youth program, a role she wielded like a scepter. Blonde, polished, with a smile that hid her sharp edges. She'd been Ethan's mentor in the art club until she wasn't. I trusted her. We all had. She'd been the one to encourage Ethan's painting, his bold murals of rainbows and abstract figures that spoke of freedom. But when Ethan started wearing pride pins and talking openly about his identity, her warmth turned to ice. That day, September 8th, 2024, I found Ethan outside the community center, his head freshly shaved, his hands shaking as he clutched his phone. She said it was for my own good. Mom, he whispered, tears streaking his face. She said I was confused, that I needed to be fixed. My blood boiled. Karen had lured him into the bathroom under the pretense of an art project, only to humiliate him, blaming his identity for her cruelty. The other kids in the club had watched, some laughing, some too scared to speak. I stormed inside, my heart pounding like a war drum. Karen was cleaning the clippers, casual as if she'd just trimmed a hedge. Maya, she said, not even looking up. He needed a wake-up call. That lifestyle's a sin, and I won't let it ruin him. You don't get to decide who my son is. I snapped, my voice low but shaking with rage. You touched him. You humiliated him. This isn't over. She smirked, tossing her hair. Good luck proving anything. Is my word against his. I wanted to scream, to tear the room apart, but Ethan needed me more. I took him home, wrapped him in a blanket, and sat with him as he cried. His paintings lined our small living room, vivid, hopeful, now a stark contrast to the boy curled up beside me. I stroked his bare scalp, feeling the stubble under my fingers, and made a silent vow. Karen would pay for this. Not with fists or shouts, but with something sharper, justice. The next morning, I called my sister, Lena, a lawyer in Columbus. She was 35, fierce, and unafraid to take on small-town bigotry. Maya, we can't let this slide, she said over the phone, her voice steady. This is assault, maybe even a hate crime. We'll need evidence, witnesses, anything to build a case. I didn't know where to start, but I knew Ethan deserved more than my anger. He deserved a fight. Willow Creek buzzed with gossip. Some neighbors sympathized. Others whispered that Ethan had asked for it by being so open. I ignored them, focusing on Ethan. He stopped going to the community center, stopped painting. His light was fading, and it killed me to see it. But I wasn't just his mother. I was his shield, his voice. I started asking questions, talking to the other kids in the art club. Most were too scared of Karen to speak. But one girl, Sophie, 16, hesitated, her eyes darting nervously. She told us it was a lesson. Sophie whispered one day outside the library. She said Ethan was leading us astray with his ideas. I didn't know she'd go that far. Sophie's words were a spark. I needed more, but it was a start. I also reached out to the local LGBTQ+ support group, a small but tight-knit community that met in a church basement. Their leader, Javier, a 30-year-old trans man with a warm smile and unshakable resolve, offered to help. "We've dealt with people like Karen before," he said. "She thinks she's untouchable, but she's not. Let's show Ethan he's not alone." Over the next week, I gathered scraps of evidence texts from Sophie, a blurry video from another kid showing Karen with the clippers, Ethan's tearful account written down for Lena. It wasn't enough yet, but it was building. Karen, meanwhile, acted untouchable, strutting around town, claiming she'd saved Ethan. Her arrogance fueled me. I wasn't just fighting for my son. I was fighting for every kid who'd ever been shamed for who they were. One night, as Ethan slept, I sat at our kitchen table, staring at his latest painting, a half-finished canvas of a phoenix rising from ashes. It was a sign. He was still in there, my fighter, my artist. I wouldn't let Karen extinguish him. I take everything back: his confidence, his joy, his place in this world. And I do it in one move, one that would make Willow Creek see the truth. The air in Willow Creek felt heavier after that day, like the town itself was holding its breath, waiting for the next blow. Ethan barely left his room, his sketchbooks untouched, his laughter gone. I could still hear Karen's voice in my head, smug and sanctimonious, and it drove me to keep pushing, to keep digging. Lena arrived on a crisp Saturday morning, her sleek black SUV a stark contrast to the rusty pickups lining our street. She hugged Ethan first, her arms wrapping him in a warmth I hadn't seen him accept since the incident. "We're gonna fix this, kid," she whispered, ruffling his stubbled head. He gave a small nod, but his eyes stayed distant. We sat at the kitchen table, papers spread out like a battle map. Lena had brought her legal pad, scribbled with notes from our phone calls. "We've got Sophie's statement and that video," she said, tapping her pen. "It's something, but we need more to make a case stick. Karen's got influence here, people listen to her. We need to show she's not just a bully but a danger." I nodded, my mind racing. Karen's power came from her role at the community center, her connections to the town council, her ability to charm or intimidate. But cracks were forming. Sophie had agreed to testify if we could protect her from backlash. Another kid, Marcus, 15, had sent me a hesitant text. "I saw what happened. I'm sorry I didn't stop her. I was building a case, brick by brick." Javier invited us to the LGBTQ+ group's next meeting. The church basement was warm, filled with folding chairs and the smell of coffee. About a dozen people sat in a circle: teens, adults, all ages, all carrying their own stories. Ethan hesitated at the door, but Javier waved him in. "You belong here," he said softly. For the first time in days, I saw a flicker of hope in Ethan's eyes. One woman, Grace, 25, shared her story of being ostracized by her family after coming out as lesbian. "People like Karen thrive on fear," she said, her voice steady. "But when you stand together, they lose." Ethan listened, quiet but attentive. When it was his turn to speak, he shook his head, but I could tell the room's energy was reaching him. Back home, I kept working. I called the school principal, Ms. Harper, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who'd always been fair. She was horrified by Ethan's story but cautious. Karen's got friends on the school board. She warned. If you go public, it'll get messy. I didn't care about messy. I cared about my son. The next day, I found Ethan sketching a small victory. His pencil moved slowly, tracing the outline of a figure with wings. It's not done. He mumbled when I peeked over his shoulder. It doesn't have to be, I said, kissing his forehead. You're enough. But Karen wasn't done. She started a whisper campaign, spreading lies that Ethan had been disruptive in the art club, that his choices were corrupting the other kids. I overheard her at the grocery store, talking to a group of mothers. I did what any responsible adult would do. My hands shook as I gripped my cart, but I didn't confront her, not yet. Instead, I focused on strategy. Lena suggested we file a formal complaint with the community center's board, accusing Karen of assault and discrimination. We needed more witnesses, though, and that meant convincing scared teenagers to speak up. I met Sophie at a coffee shop, away from prying eyes. She fidgeted, her dark braids swinging as she glanced around. I'm scared, Ms. Carter, she admitted. Karen said if I talk, I'll lose my spot in the art show. The annual Willow Creek Art Show was a big deal. Colleges scouted it, and Ethan had been set to showcase his work before Karen's attack. She can't control you forever, I said gently. You're stronger than her. Sophie bit her lip, then nodded. I'll do it. For Ethan. It was a breakthrough, but we needed more. Marcus agreed to talk, too, after I promised to keep his name out of it as long as possible. The video he'd sent was grainy, but it showed Karen's face, her hand on the clippers, Ethan's shoulders hunched in defeat. It was enough to make my heart ache all over again. Javier organized a rally outside the community center, a show of support for Ethan and others like him. It was small, maybe 20 people, but powerful. Ethan didn't want to go, but he watched from our porch as rainbow flags waved in the distance. I stood with him, my arm around his shoulders. They're fighting for you, I said. He didn't reply, but he leaned into me, just a little. Karen, of course, didn't stay quiet. She posted on the town's Facebook group, calling the rally divisive and claiming she was the victim of a witch hunt. Her supporters chimed in, but so did others, people I didn't expect, like old Mr. Thompson, who ran the hardware store. That boy's got a right to be himself, he wrote. The tide was shifting, slowly. I knew we were close to something big. Lena was drafting the complaint, and Javier was mobilizing more allies. But Karen was cunning, and I couldn't shake the feeling she had one more card to play. I just didn't know what it was yet. The community center's board meeting was set for a Tuesday evening, and the air in Willow Creek crackled with tension. Rumors swirled. Some said Karen was untouchable. Others whispered she'd crossed a line even her allies couldn't defend. I didn't care about the gossip. I cared about the truth. Ethan was still fragile, but he'd started painting again. Small canvases filled with jagged lines and muted colors. It was progress, but it wasn't enough. I wanted my son back, the one who laughed too loud, who wore his pride pins like badges of honor. I wanted Karen to face consequences, not just for him but for every kid she'd ever made feel small. Lena and I spent hours preparing for the meeting. She'd polished the complaint, citing assault, harassment, and discrimination under Ohio law. Sophie and Marcus had signed statements, And we had the video, now cleaned up by a tech-savvy friend of Javier's. It wasn't perfect, but it was damning. Karen's smug face, the clippers in her hand. Ethan's hunched format told a story no one could ignore. The community center was packed that night, folding chairs spilling into the hallway. I recognized faces, neighbors, teachers, even a few of Ethan's classmates. Some nodded at me, others avoided my gaze. Karen sat at the front, flanked by her husband, Tom, a burly man who owned the local auto shop. She looked composed, her blonde hair perfect, her smile practiced. The board chair, Mrs. Ellison, a retired librarian in her 60s, called the meeting to order. Lena stood, her voice clear and commanding as she presented our case. She didn't sugarcoat it. Karen had assaulted a minor, targeted him for his sexual orientation, and abused her authority. She played the video on a projector, and the room went silent. Ethan's soft sob, caught on the audio, echoed like a gunshot. Karen stood to respond, her voice dripping with faux sincerity. "I was trying to help Ethan," she said. "He was confused, acting out, influencing the other kids. I acted in the best interest of the program." A few people nodded, but others shifted uncomfortably. I gripped my chair, my nails digging into the wood. Then Sophie stood up. Her voice shook, but she didn't back down. "Ms. Mitchell told us Ethan was a bad influence because he's gay. She shaved his head to humiliate him. I was there." The room erupted in murmurs. Karen's smile faltered, just for a second. Mrs. Ellison called for a recess to review the evidence. I stepped outside for air, my heart pounding. Ethan had stayed home, too raw to face the crowd. But I texted him, "We're fighting, baby. You're not alone." He didn't reply, but I knew he'd read it. Back inside, the board deliberated for an hour. When they returned, Mrs. Ellison's face was grim. "We're suspending Ms. Mitchell pending a full investigation," she announced. "This matter is serious, and will involve the authorities if needed." Karen's face went pale, but she didn't speak. Tom grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the door as whispers followed them. It was a victory, but it didn't feel like enough. Karen was suspended, not fired, and the investigation could drag on. I wanted her gone, her influence dismantled. Lena squeezed my hand. "This is just the start, Maya. We keep pushing." The next day, the town was split. Some called me a hero. Others said I was tearing the community apart. Karen's supporters rallied, claiming she was being canceled for her beliefs. But the LGBTQ+ group grew bolder, organizing a second rally. This time, Ethan came. He didn't speak, but he held a sign, "I am enough." I cried when I saw it, my heart swelling with pride. Javier introduced us to a reporter from a Columbus newspaper, Rachel, 28, who wanted to cover the story. She interviewed Ethan, gently coaxing out his experience. "I just wanted to paint," he told her, his voice soft but steady. She took that from me. Rachel's article, published online, went viral in Willow Creek, sparking debates on social media. Some called for Karen's resignation. Others doubled down, defending her. Then came the bombshell. Marcus, the quiet kid who'd sent the video, came forward with more. He'd recorded Karen weeks earlier, ranting about fixing Ethan and cleaning up the art club. The audio was clear, her voice venomous. Lena sent it to the board and the police. Assault was one thing, hate speech was another. Karen's world started to crumble. The community center barred her from the premises, and the police opened an investigation. But she wasn't done fighting. She posted a video online, tears streaming, claiming she was the real victim, persecuted for her faith. It got thousands of views, and her supporters flooded my inbox with hate mail. I shielded Ethan from it, but I knew he felt the weight. One night, he showed me a new paintinga figure standing in a storm, surrounded by rainbow light. "It's you," he said quietly. "You're fighting for me." I hugged him so tight I thought my heart might break. I wasn't just fighting for him. I was fighting for us, for our home, for a world where he could be himself without fear. But Karen had one last move, and I could feel it coming. She wasn't the type to go down quietly. Karen's video was like gasoline on a smoldering fire. Willow Creek split down the middle, half rallying behind her tearful plea, half outraged by her actions. My phone buzzed constantly with notifications, support from strangers, venom from her allies. I turned it off, focusing on Ethan, who was slowly reclaiming pieces of himself through his art. The police investigation moved slowly, but Lena kept the pressure on. She'd sent the audio of Karen's rant to the district attorney, arguing it showed intent to harm based on Ethan's identity. This could be a hate crime, she told me over coffee at my kitchen table. If we play this right, she'll face real consequences. I nodded, but doubt gnawed at me. Karen's connections ran deep. Her husband's auto shop sponsored half the town's events, and her friends on the town council weren't backing down. Ethan, meanwhile, was finding his footing. The LGBTQ+ group had become his safe haven. Javier invited him to help paint a mural at the church, a vibrant rainbow design celebrating resilience. Ethan hesitated at first, but when he picked up a brush, I saw a spark in his eyes I hadn't seen in weeks. "It feels good to create again," he told me, paint smudged on his cheek. I smiled, but my heart ached. Karen had tried to steal this from him. The art show was approaching, and Ethan's name was still on the roster. I worried he'd back out, but Sophie convinced him to submit a piece. "You're better than her," she told him, her voice fierce. "Show them what you can do." Ethan spent hours in his room, working on a new canvas. He wouldn't let me see it, saying it was a surprise. I didn't push. I was just grateful he was painting. Karen's next move came at a town hall meeting, organized to discuss community values. She stood at the podium, her voice steady, painting herself as a martyr. "I acted out of love," she said, her eyes scanning the crowd. "I wanted to protect our children from confusion." A few people clapped, but others booed. I sat in the back with Lena, my fists clenched. Javier stood up, his voice calm but cutting. "You don't protect kids by humiliating them," he said. "You hurt Ethan because of who he is. That's not love, it's hate." The room erupted. Karen's supporters shouted over Javier, but he didn't flinch. Neither did I. I stood, my voice shaking but clear. "My son is not your project to fix. He's perfect as he is." Ethan wasn't there. He'd asked to stay home, but I felt him in every word. The crowd quieted, some nodding, others glaring. Karen's face twisted, but she didn't respond. After the meeting, Rachel, the reporter, approached me. "I'm writing a follow-up," she said. "People need to hear Ethan's side." I agreed to let her interview him again, but only if he was ready. When I asked him, he surprised me. "I want to do it," he said. "I want people to know I'm not ashamed." My heart swelled with pride, but fear lingered. Karen's supporters were growing louder, and I worried they'd target him. The police called the next day. They'd interviewed Karen, who admitted to shaving Ethan's head but claimed it was consensual. A lesson he'd agreed to. The lie made my blood boil, but Lena was calm. "She's digging her own grave," she said. "Her story doesn't match the evidence." The video and audio were with the DA now, and Sophie and Marcus were ready to testify. But Karen's influence still loomed, and I knew she'd fight dirty. Then came a breakthrough. Another parent, Lisa, 42, contacted me. Her daughter, Mia, 16, had been in the art club and witnessed Karen's bullying before Ethan's incident. She told Mia her skirt was too short because it was tempting the boys. Lisa said, her voice trembling, "I didn't speak up then, but I'm with you now." Lisa's story wasn't enough for a legal case, but it was another crack in Karen's armor. The rally outside the community center grew. Javier and Grace organized it, and this time, nearly 50 people showed up, waving rainbow flags and signs reading "Love Wins." Ethan joined, holding his "I am enough" sign. When a group of Karen's supporters heckled us, he didn't flinch. "I'm not hiding anymore," he told me later, his voice steady. I hugged him, tears in my eyes. Rachel's article dropped that week, titled "A Mother's Fight for Her Son's Truth." It detailed Ethan's story, the video, the audio, and the town's divide. It spread beyond Willow Creek, picked up by bigger outlets. Suddenly, Karen wasn't just a local problem, she was a national story. Her supporters doubled down, but so did ours. Petitions circulated, demanding her removal from the community center. The board was under pressure, and I could feel the momentum shifting. But Karen wasn't done. She filed a countersuit against me, claiming defamation and emotional distress. Lena laughed when she saw it. "She's desperate," she said. "This won't hold up." Still, it was a reminder of how far she'd go to protect her image. Couldn't let her scare me. Ethan was counting on me, and so were the other kids she'd hurt. One night, Ethan showed me his painting for the art show of Phoenix. Its wings spread wide, rising from a storm of shadows. "It's us," he said, his voice soft but strong. "We're coming back." I knew then that whatever Karen threw at us, we'd face it together. And I was ready to make my move. Karen's countersuit hit like a slap, but I refused to flinch. She claimed I'd slandered her, that my false accusations had ruined her reputation. Lena called it a desperate ploy, but it still stung knowing she was twisting the narrative, painting herself as the victim while Ethan carried the scars. The art show was 2 days away, and Ethan was determined to attend. His Phoenix painting was finished, a masterpiece of vibrant reds and golds against a stormy backdrop. "I want people to see it," he told me, his jaw set. "I want them to know I'm still here." I was proud, but nervous. Karen would be there, still technically part of the community center until the investigation concluded. Lena and I met with the DA, a stern woman named Ms. Patel, who reviewed the evidence. "The video and audio are strong," she said, her voice measured. "Combined with the witnesses, we're building a case for assault and possibly a hate crime." But she warned us, Karen's connections might delay things. "She's got friends in high places," Ms. Patel said. "We need to be airtight." Back in Willow Creek, the town was a powder keg. Rachel's article had brought reporters from Cleveland and Cincinnati, their cameras flashing at the community center. Karen played the martyr, giving interviews about her persecution. Her supporters picketed the center, holding signs that read, "Protect our values." But our side grew stronger, too. Javier's rallies drew bigger crowds, and Ethan's story inspired others to share their own experiences with Karen's bullying. One of those was Tyler, a 19-year-old former art club member who'd moved away after high school. He messaged me on Facebook. His words raw. Karen made my life hell when I was 16. She caught me holding hands with my boyfriend and threatened to out me to my parents. Tyler was willing to testify, adding another layer to our case. I thanked him, my heart heavy with the realization that Ethan wasn't Karen's only victim. The night before the art show, Ethan sat me down. "Mom, I'm scared," he admitted, his voice small. "What if they hate me? What if they think I'm wrong?" I took his hands, looking into his eyes. "You are not wrong," I said fiercely. "You are brave, and you are enough. No matter what happens tomorrow, I'm with you." He nodded, and for the first time in weeks, he smiled a real, unguarded smile. The art show was held in the community center's gymnasium, transformed with string lights and easels. Ethan's painting stood near the center, its phoenix glowing under the lights. The room buzzed with people, locals, reporters, even college scouts. Karen was there, too, hovering near the judge's table, her smile tight. I kept my distance, but my eyes never left her. When Ethan's name was called, he walked to his painting, his head held high despite the stubble on his scalp. He spoke softly, but his words carried, "This is about rising above hate. It's about being who you are, no matter what anyone says." The room was silent, then erupted in applause. I saw tears in Sophie's eyes, pride in Javier's. Even some of Karen's supporters looked uncomfortable, their conviction wavering. Karen didn't clap. She stood rigid, her face a mask. But I saw the crack in her facade when a judge, a professor from a nearby art school, approached Ethan. "Your work is powerful," he said. "I'd like to talk about scholarship opportunities." Ethan's face lit up, and I felt a surge of hope. Karen couldn't take this from him. After the show, a group of kids surrounded Ethan, praising his painting. Sophie hugged him, and Marcus gave him a shy high five. For the first time, I saw my son surrounded by friends who saw him, not just his identity. But the night wasn't over. As we left, Karen cornered me outside, her voice low and venomous. "You think you've won," she hissed. "This town will never accept your son." I stepped closer, my voice steady. "This town is bigger than you, Karen. And so is Ethan." She flinched, then turned away, but I knew she wasn't done. Her countersuit was still pending, and the police investigation was moving too slowly. I needed something bigger, something to end this once and for all. The next day, Lisa and Mia came forward with more evidencia journal Mia had kept, detailing Karen's pattern of targeting kids who didn't fit her mold. It wasn't admissible in court, but it was enough to share with the board. Lena sent it, along with Tyler's statement, demanding Karen's permanent removal. The board called an emergency meeting, and this time, the room was standing room only. Mrs. Ellison read a statement. "Based on new evidence, we're terminating Ms. Mitchell's position, effective immediately." The crowd gasped, then cheered. Karen wasn't there, been barred from attending, but her absence felt like a victory. Lena squeezed my hand, and I texted Ethan, "We did it." But I knew it wasn't over. Karen's countersuit loomed, and her supporters were angrier than ever. I had to protect Ethan, to make sure she couldn't hurt him again. I was planning my final move, and it would be one she'd never see coming. Karen's termination was a seismic shift in Willow Creek, but it didn't bring the peace I'd hoped for. Her supporters flooded social media, calling the board's decision a lynching of traditional values. My diner shifts became battlegrounds. Some customers tipped generously, whispering support, while others left nasty notes with their bills. Ethan, though, was blooming. His art show success had sparked something in him, and he was sketching again, filling pages with bold, defiant lines. Lena warned me to stay vigilant. Karen's countersuit is weak, but she's not giving up, she said, poring over legal documents at my kitchen table. The suit claimed I'd defamed her by spreading lies about the shaving incident. But Lena was confident we could counter it with the video, audio, and witness statements. Still, the DA's office was dragging its feet, and I worried Karen might slip through the cracks. The LGBTQ+ group kept the pressure on, organizing a town-wide art project to celebrate diversity. Ethan and Sophie led a team painting a mural on the community center's exterior, a soaring rainbow phoenix, its wings spread wide. Watching Ethan climb a ladder, paintbrush in hand, I felt a swell of pride. He was reclaiming his space, his voice. But I couldn't shake the fear that Karen was plotting something. Sure enough, she struck back. A week after her termination, she held a press conference outside her husband's auto shop, flanked by a lawyer and a small crowd of supporters. "I'm fighting for my reputation and for the values of this town," she declared, her voice steady on the local news. She announced a fundraiser to cover her legal fees, claiming she was the victim of a radical agenda. The fundraiser raised thousands overnight, and my heart sank. She was turning this into a crusade. Javier called an emergency meeting at the church basement. "We can't let her control the narrative," he said, his eyes fierce. "We need to show the world what she did." Rachel, the reporter, suggested a documentary-style feature, combining Ethan's story with others Karen had targeted. Tyler, Mia, and even Grace agreed to share their experiences. Ethan hesitated but nodded. "I want people to know it's okay to be themselves," he said. I hugged him, my throat tight. Filming began the next day. Rachel followed Ethan to the mural, capturing his quiet strength as he painted. She interviewed Sophie, who spoke with newfound confidence, and Tyler, whose story of being outed by Karen brought tears to my eyes. The footage was raw, powerful, and I knew it could change things. But it also made Ethan a bigger target. Karen's supporters started leaving hateful comments online, some threatening. I installed a security camera outside our house. My nerves frayed. Then came a breakthrough. The DA called Karen had been charged with misdemeanor assault and a hate crime enhancement. The evidence was too strong to ignore: the video, the audio, the witness statements. Lena grinned when she told me, "This is it, Maya. She's not getting out of this." But the charges were just the start. A trial could take months, and Karen was still free, still rallying her base. Ethan's mural was nearly complete, a beacon of color against the community center's drab brick. The town was buzzing about it, some calling it a masterpiece, others a provocation. At the unveiling, a crowd gathered: supporters, critics, reporters. Ethan stood beside me, his head high, his shaved scalp now a badge of survival. Javier spoke first, dedicating the mural to every kid who's ever felt unseen. Then Ethan stepped forward, his voice steady. "This is for us," he said, gesturing to the phoenix. "We rise, no matter what." The crowd cheered, but I noticed a group of Karen's supporters in the back, their faces hard. One, a man in his 40s, shouted, "This is a disgrace," before storming off. I tensed, but Javier put a hand on my shoulder. "Let them yell," he said. "They're losing." Rachel's feature aired that night on a regional news channel. It was unflinching: Ethan's tearful recounting of the shaving, Tyler's story of fear, Mia's journal entries. The response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from across Ohio, then beyond, offering support for Ethan and demanding justice. a national LGBTQ plus organization reached out, offering legal and emotional resources. The tide was turning, but Karen's fundraiser kept growing, and her countersuit loomed. I decided to take a risk. I contacted the art school professor who'd scouted Ethan, asking if he could amplify the story. He agreed, sharing Ethan's painting on the school's social media with a caption about resilience in the face of hate. It went viral, and suddenly, Ethan wasn't just a local guide, was a symbol of courage. Scholarship offers started coming in, and I cried reading them, knowing my son's dreams were within reach. But Karen wasn't done. Late one night, I got a call from Lisa. "Check the mural," she said, her voice urgent. I drove to the community center, my heart pounding. There, in red spray paint, were the words, "Sinners burn." Ethan's phoenix was defaced, its wings smeared. I stood there, shaking with rage, knowing this was Karen's doing or her supporters. I called the police, but I knew they'd find nothing concrete. Ethan saw the mural the next morning. I expected him to break, but he just stared, then picked up a paintbrush. "We'll fix it," he said, his voice hard. And we did him, Sophie, Javier, and me, painting over the hate, making the phoenix brighter. It was a declaration. We wouldn't be silenced. I knew then that my final move was coming. Karen thought she could break us, but she'd underestimated a mother's love and a community's strength. I was ready to end this. The defaced mural was a gut punch, but it only steeled my resolve. Ethan's determination to repaint it, to make the phoenix rise again, showed me he was stronger than Karen's hate. Willow Creek was at a crossroads, and I was done waiting for the law to catch up. It was time to take the fight to her. Lena and I strategized at my kitchen table, surrounded by coffee mugs and legal notes. Karen's countersuit was still active, but her assault charge was gaining traction. The DA had scheduled a preliminary hearing, and our evidence audio, witness statements was solid. But Karen's fundraiser was thriving, and her lawyer was pushing for a plea deal to avoid a trial. "She's trying to slip out with a slap on the wrist," Lena said, her eyes narrowing. "We can't let that happen." I reached out to Rachel, who was editing the documentary feature. She'd added footage of the mural's defacement, framing it as part of Karen's campaign of intimidation. This could tip the scales. She told me, "People are angry, Maya. They're ready to stand with you." The feature was set to air nationally, and I hoped it would pressure the DA to push harder. Ethan, meanwhile, was thriving in small ways. The scholarship offers kept coming, and he'd started talking about college, his eyes bright with possibility. The LGBTQ plus group had become his second family, with Javier and Sophie checking in daily. But the vandalism had shaken him more than he let on. One night, I found him staring at his phoenix painting, his fingers tracing the canvas. "What if they never stop?" he whispered. I knelt beside him, my voice firm. "They will. Because we won't." The preliminary hearing was held in a small courthouse on the edge of Willow Creek. Karen sat across from us, her face composed but her eyes darting nervously. Lena presented our case, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. She played the video, the audio, and read statements from Sophie, Marcus, and Tyler. The judge, a stern man in his 60s, listened intently. Karen's lawyer argued she'd acted in good faith, but the judge wasn't buying it. He set a trial date for 3 months out, denying her plea deal. It was a win, but it meant more waiting. Karen's supporters didn't take it well. They picketed the courthouse, their signs uglier now, "No Sodom in Willow Creek." I shielded Ethan from the worst, but he saw enough. "Why do they hate me so much?" he asked one night, his voice breaking. I didn't have an answer, only a promise. They don't get to win. The documentary aired a week later, and the response was explosive. Social media lit up with justice for Ethan, trending nationally. Strangers donated to a fund Javier set up for Ethan's college expenses. A major art gallery in Columbus offered to display his Phoenix painting, calling it a testament to resilience. Ethan was overwhelmed, but I saw his confidence growing. He wasn't just my son anymore. He was a voice for others. Karen's countersuit started to unravel. Her lawyer struggled to counter the documentary's impact, and her fundraiser stalled as donors backed away. But she wasn't done. She organized a family values rally, drawing a crowd of about 100. She stood on a makeshift stage, her voice shaking with conviction. This town is under attack, she said. We won't let radicals destroy our way of life. Her words were met with cheers, but fewer than before. The town was tiring of her crusade. Then came the turning point. Lisa's daughter, Mia, found an old email from Karen to the art club, sent months before Ethan's incident. It outlined rules for behavior, including a line about inappropriate lifestyles being grounds for discipline. It wasn't explicit, but it was enough to show Karen's bias. Lena sent it to the DA, who added it to the case. The community center board, under pressure from the documentary and public outcry, issued a public apology to Ethan and promised reforms. I knew this was my moment. I organized a community forum, inviting everyone's supporters, critics, neutrals. I wanted Willow Creek to face itself. The night of the forum, the community center was packed. Ethan stood beside me, his Phoenix painting projected on a screen. I spoke first, my voice steady. This isn't just about my son. It's about every kid who's been told they don't belong. We can be better than this. Ethan took the mic, his hands trembling but his voice clear. I didn't choose to be gay. I chose to be honest. And I won't let anyone make me ashamed. The room erupted in applause, even from some of Karen's former supporters. Javier spoke next, followed by Sophie, Mia, and Tyler. Their stories wove a tapestry of pain and strength, and I saw tears in the crowd. Karen didn't show, but her absence spoke volumes. Her support was crumbling, her narrative exposed. The forum ended with a pledge to create a safe space for all kids at the community center, with Javier appointed to oversee it. Ethan's mural, repainted and brighter than ever, became a symbol of that promise. But I wasn't done. Karen's trial was coming, and I had one final move to ensure she'd never hurt another kid again. I just needed the right moment to play it. The forum had shifted something fundamental in Willow Creek. The community center's pledge to change, Ethan's mural shining brighter than ever, and the growing support for justice for Ethan felt like a tide turning. But Karen's trial loomed, and her countersuit against me still hung like a storm cloud. I knew she'd fight to the end, and I had to be ready. Ethan was different now, stronger. He'd started wearing his pride pins again, pinning them to his jacket with a defiance that made my heart soar. The scholarship offers were piling up, and he'd chosen a small art school in Columbus, one that promised a community where he could thrive. I'm gonna keep painting, he told me one morning, his sketchbook open to a new designa figure standing tall against a wave of color. I hugged him, knowing he was reclaiming his light. Lena was relentless, preparing for the trial like a general. The DA had upgraded Karen's charges to include felony assault, citing the hate crime enhancement and the pattern of behavior from Mia's journal and Tyler's testimony. She's cornered, Lena said, her eyes gleaming. But she'll try to spin it. We need to be ready for anything. Karen's rally had fizzled. drawing fewer supporters than before. The documentary's impact was undeniable. People across the country were talking about Ethan, about Willow Creek, about the cost of intolerance. But Karen still had her loyalists, and they were loud. Her husband, Tom, had started confronting people at his auto shop, calling the charges a witch hunt. I worried he might do something reckless, but I kept my focus on the trial. Rachel's documentary was nominated for a Regional Journalism Award, and she invited Ethan to the ceremony in Cincinnati. He was nervous, but I convinced him to go. "You're not just a story," I told him. "You're a voice." He wore a suit, his pride pin gleaming, and when the documentary won, he was asked to speak. "This is for every kid who's been told they're not enough," he said, his voice steady on the live stream. I watched from home, tears streaming, knowing the world was seeing my son's strength. Back in Willow Creek, the community center was transforming. Javier had been appointed to a new diversity council, and he was working with Sophie and other teens to create programs for inclusivity. Ethan joined, designing posters and leading art workshops. It was healing, but the trial was a shadow over everything. Karen's lawyer was pushing for a plea deal again, offering community service instead of jail time. The DA was hesitant, but public pressure was mounting. Then came a bombshell. Another former art club member, Emily, teen, contacted me. She'd moved to Cleveland but saw the documentary and wanted to help. "Karen singled me out for being non-binary," she said, her voice trembling over the phone. "She made me feel like I didn't belong." Emily had kept emails from Karen, warning her to dress appropriately or leave the club. Lena added them to the case, and the DA agreed to call Emily as a witness. The trial began on a cold November morning. The courthouse was packed reporters, locals, activists. Karen sat with her lawyer, her face pale but defiant. Lena and the DA presented our case, the video, the audio, the witness statements, the emails. Sophie took the stand, her voice clear as she recounted Karen's cruelty. Marcus followed, his testimony quiet but powerful. Tyler and Emily spoke, too, painting a picture of a woman who'd abused her power for years. Karen's defense was weak. She claimed she'd acted out of concern for Ethan, that the shaving was a misunderstanding. But the evidence was overwhelming, and the judge's face grew sterner with every lie. Ethan didn't testify, didn't want to relive it, but he sat in the courtroom, his hand in mine, his eyes fixed on Karen. The prosecution rested, and Karen took the stand. She cried, claiming she was a devoted Christian, protecting the town's values. But under Lena's cross-examination, her story crumbled. "You targeted Ethan because of his sexual orientation, didn't you?" Lena asked, her voice like steel. Karen stammered, her composure breaking. The courtroom was silent, the weight of her guilt palpable. Outside, Karen's supporters protested, but their numbers were dwindling. The documentary had changed the narrative, and justice for Ethan was everywhere. The judge set a date for the verdict, and I felt a flicker of hope. But Karen's countersuit was still active, and I knew she'd use it to drag this out. That night, Ethan showed me a new sketch of Phoenix surrounded by faces, each one distinct but united. "It's the community," he said. "All of us, together." I realized then that my final move wasn't just about Karen, it was about building something lasting, something that would outlive her hate. I met with Javier and the Diversity Council, proposing a permanent art program for marginalized kids, named after Ethan's Phoenix. They loved it, and the community center agreed to fund it. Ethan would lead the first workshop, teaching kids to paint their own stories. It was a legacy, a way to ensure no one could take his voice again. But I still had one card to play, one that would end Karen's reign for good. I just needed the verdict to set it in motion. The wait for the verdict was agonizing, like holding my breath underwater. Willow Creek felt suspended, the air thick with anticipation and division. Ethan, though, was a beacon of light, was teaching his first art workshop at the community center, guiding a group of teens through painting their own phoenixes. Watching him laugh with them, his hands covered in paint, I felt a surge of hope. But Karen's shadow still loomed. Her countersuit had been dismissed the week before. A small victory. Lena had argued it was baseless, a retaliation tactic, and the judge agreed, citing the overwhelming evidence against Karen. But the assault trial was the real battle, and I knew the verdict would shape Ethan's future and the town's. Lena and I spent hours preparing for every outcome. If Karen was convicted, she'd face jail time, but her supporters might escalate their attacks. If she was acquitted, I feared Ethan would lose the ground he'd gained. "We've done everything we can," Lena said, her voice steady but tired. "The evidence is on our side." I nodded, but my heart was heavy. Justice felt so close, yet so fragile. The documentary's impact kept growing. It was picked up by a streaming platform, reaching millions. Ethan's story inspired letters, donations, and even a scholarship fund in his name, started by a national LGBTQ+ organization. He was shy about the attention but proud. "I didn't think I could make a difference," he told me one night, sketching in his room. "You always did," I said, kissing his forehead. Karen's supporters were quieter now, their protests smaller. The mural, repainted and guarded by volunteers, stood untouched, a symbol of resilience. But Tom, her husband, was a wild card. He'd been seen arguing with customers at his auto shop, blaming outsiders for Karen's downfall. I kept my security camera on, just in case. The verdict came on a snowy December morning. The courthouse was packed, the air electric. Ethan sat beside me, his hand gripping mine. The judge read the decision: guilty on felony assault with a hate crime enhancement. Karen would serve 6 months in jail and 2 years of probation, and she was permanently barred from working with minors. The courtroom erupted cheers from our side, gasps from hers. Karen's face crumpled, her composure gone. Tom stormed out, his face red with rage. I hugged Ethan, tears streaming. "It's over," I whispered. He nodded, his eyes wet but bright. Outside, reporters swarmed, but Javier and Sophie shielded us, guiding us to the car. The news spread fast, and by evening, justice for Ethan was trending again. Willow Creek was changing, slowly but surely. But I wasn't done. Karen's conviction was justice, but it wasn't enough. I wanted to ensure no one could follow in her footsteps. My final move was a proposal to the town council, drafted with Javier and Lena, a mandatory inclusivity training program for all community center staff and volunteers, with a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. We presented it at a packed council meeting. Ethan's mural projected behind us. I spoke first, my voice steady. "This isn't about punishment. It's about protecting our kids, every single one." Javier followed, outlining the program's details, and Ethan closed, his voice soft but powerful. "I just want other kids to feel safe being themselves." The council voted unanimously to adopt it, and the room cheered. Even some of Karen's former supporters clapped, their resolve softened by Ethan's courage. The program, named Phoenix Rising, launched the next month. Ethan led the first art workshop under it, teaching kids to paint their stories without fear. Sophie and Mia joined, And even Marcus showed up, his shy smile of victory. The community center was becoming what it should have been, a place for everyone. Karen's sentence began, and her influence faded. Tom sold the auto shop and moved away, unable to face the town's shift. The hate mail stopped, replaced by letters of support. Ethan's Phoenix painting was displayed in the Columbus Gallery, drawing crowds who saw not just art, but a story of survival. One night, Ethan showed me a new painting, a vibrant field of colors, figures holding hands under a rainbow sky. "It's the future," he said, his voice full of hope. I hugged him, knowing we'd fought for that future together. Karen had tried to break him, but she'd only made us stronger. I'd taken everything back: Ethan's confidence, his joy, his place in the world. And I'd done it in one move: love. Relentless and unyielding, backed by a community that chose to rise. Spring came to Willow Creek, and with it, a new kind of peace. The community center buzzed with life, kids painting, laughing, creating under the Phoenix Rising program. Ethan was at the heart of it, his workshops packed with teens who looked up to him. His shaved head had grown out, soft curls returning, but he wore his pride pins like armor, a reminder of what he'd overcome. Karen's conviction had settled like dust after a storm. She was serving her sentence, her influence a fading memory. The town council's inclusivity program was thriving, with Javier training staff and volunteers to foster a space where no kid would feel shamed. The mural, now a local landmark, drew visitors from across Ohio, each stroke of Ethan's brush a testament to resilience. I still worked my shifts at the diner, but the air was lighter now. Customers stopped to ask about Ethan, to share stories of their own kids finding courage. The hate mail was gone, replaced by thank you notes and invitations to speak at schools and community groups. I wasn't a hero, just a mother who'd fought for her son. But I'd learned that love, backed by action, could move mountains. Ethan was preparing for college, his scholarship secured. He'd chosen a program that blended art and activism, inspired by his own journey. "I want to help kids like me," he told me one evening, packing his sketchbooks. "I want them to know they're enough." I smiled, my heart full. He was 17, but he'd grown into a man before my eyes, his strength forged in fire. Lena had moved on to a new case, but she checked in weekly, her pride in us evident. "You changed this town, Maya," she said over coffee. "You and Ethan." I shook my head. "We all did. Sophie, Marcus, Mia, Tyler, Javier, Rachel." Every voice had mattered, every story a brick in the foundation we'd built. The documentary was now a teaching tool, shown in schools and community centers nationwide. Ethan's Phoenix painting toured galleries, each exhibition raising funds for LGBTQ+ youth. He was shy about the fame but embraced the chance to make a difference. One day, he got a letter from a 14-year-old in Texas, who wrote, "Your story helped me come out to my parents." They hugged me. Ethan cried reading it, and I did, too. Willow Creek wasn't perfect. Some still clung to old prejudices, whispering in corners. But they were quieter now, outnumbered by those who'd chosen love over fear. The community center hosted its first Pride event that June, a small but vibrant celebration. Ethan led a mural workshop, kids painting rainbows and phoenixes under the summer sun. Javier emceed, his laughter infectious, and Sophie performed a spoken-word piece about acceptance. I stood in the crowd, watching my son shine, knowing we'd won more than a trial, we'd won a future. One evening, as the sun set over the cornfields, Ethan and I sat on our porch, his latest painting between us. It was a portrait of Usmi, fierce and protective, him radiant and unapologetic, surrounded by a swirl of color. "This is who we are," he said, his voice steady. "A team." I nodded, tears in my eyes. "Always." Karen had tried to break us, to shame Ethan into silence. But she'd underestimated a mother's love, a community's strength, and a boy's courage. We'd taken everything back: his joy, his art, his right to be himself. And in one move, we changed Willow Creek forever. As the stars came out, Ethan leaned against me, his head on my shoulder. The world felt wide open, full of possibility. We'd risen, like his phoenix, and no one could dim our light again. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.